Hello and welcome to Transfermarkt TV. I'm Manu, Veth. He is Euan Robertson. First of all, Euan, thanks for joining me. Second, big topic today is Antony and Manchester United. To say he struggled is a little bit of an understatement. I think the real question, though, that we need to ask here is, why has he struggled? And I know you just wrote a big feature on that for Transfermarkt. Try to break this down for us. What is the big issue here?
I mean, there's several issues behind Antony's disappointing form, especially this season. The numbers are really, really bad for a player who came in for 95 million euros. And he's not got a single goal or assist. And in the Premier League this season, his only goal contributions came against Newport County, who are in League Two, in the FA Cup. So from a winger who plays for one of the biggest clubs in the country, you'd expect his attacking numbers to be much, much better. You'd caveat by saying Manchester United's attack hasn't been great this season, but Antony's came back into the spotlight after the weekend when Manchester United lost to Fulham, which was their 10th defeat this season in the Premier League. When Rasmus Højlund was injured, the kind of expectation for many people was that Antony would come back in the right hand side, and Marcus Rashford would move up top, and then Garnacho would go over to the left. But Ten Hag, who bought Antony and obviously had them at Ajax in the first place, gave Amari Forson his first ever start on the right hand side. They didn't bring Antony on until the 99th minute, choosing to bring on two other players, including Amad Diallo, who's relatively untested at Manchester United, ahead of him. So it speaks volumes really for his downfall, because last season and certainly the start of this season, a lot of people said that Ten Hag was showing favouritism towards Antony because he wasn't performing, but he was playing week in, week out. But now he's behind two youngsters in the pecking order. It's just because his performances haven't been good enough. He plays. He can only play in that right wing. Really, he cuts in on his left foot, but his final product's been terrible. He lacks that real pace to kind of go past players. Once he gets past players, he often checks back and tries to beat them again and again. It's really quite troubling, and Manchester United will also have a big decision to make on him in the future.
Right. I mean, I want to touch on that for sure. But I guess like the main question that a lot of people will have, and you mention it, Antony was brought in by Erik ten Hag, and Antony worked quite well at Ajax. And I know the Eredivisie is a very different competition than the Premier League. Ajax is of course the biggest club in the Netherlands, and the pressure there is immense. But he was or is an Erik ten Hag player, but at the same time, it isn't like Man United had a huge amount of success on the transfer market. So, in your mind, then, is this a symptom of Man United's struggles to find the right players? How much of the blame goes onto the club? How much blame goes on the manager? And what does it say about Manchester United's transfer strategy in general?
Yeah, I think a big problem has been Manchester United's transfer strategy, especially when it comes to Antony. Basically, United ordered them all summer, and they didn't pull the trigger earlier in the window. They waited until the last few days of the window. Therefore, Ajax were in a strong negotiating position. They know Manu were desperate for a right winger. They obviously started the season terribly under Ten Hag last year, and there was a real panic. They also brought in Casemiro for big money, and they overpaid massively for Antony. His market value on transfer market when United spent 95 million euros to bring him in, it was only 35 million euros, so that's overpaying by 60 on what our Dutch experts said. And Kevin Lux, Transfermarkt's area manager for Netherlands, contributed to this piece with some fantastic insight. He basically said everyone in Holland was shocked that Manchester United paid that much money for him. They couldn't quite believe it.
And then, of course, like that falls into several other players not working out. The Jadon Sancho saga is well documented, and I don't want to get too deep into this because this is about Antony. But when you look at the overall picture, there isn't much success that Man United had on the transfer window. And I find this one is so very much intriguing because this player was brought in by someone who managed him previously. Is it just the club maybe not targeting the right players, Euan?
Yeah, I think that's been a major problem, and especially since Erik ten Hag came in, he's not really had that support system within the recruitment team. He's a lot of the players that have come into the club have been players that Ten Hag has worked with before or known before from the Eredivisie, and that's been a problem, I think, with Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos coming in. The sporting structure will change, and But undoubtedly, this has been arguably one of the worst transfers across the last decade. If you look at their transfer record since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, there's been very few successes. Bruno Fernandes is probably the biggest success in terms of signings in that period, and they've not really got a clear plan. Another criticism that Erik ten Hag's had is that he doesn't have a clear style of play, which he had at Ajax. Ajax are renowned for how they played, and Antony was a big part of that, as was Donny van de Beek, who obviously struggled at United as well. But in Manchester United, there's a real lack of style of play, especially this season with injuries, and I think that just makes it more difficult for players to kind of thrive.
Yeah, that is, a really interesting part of the story, isn't it? That you had two players now struggle under the manager who had a really clear system at Ajax and was successful with that system, and then all of a sudden he goes to a new club and brings these two players and it doesn't work at all. And that kind of ties into my next question then for you, Euan. Do you think, and this sounds so odd because the guy that had the best system for Antony is literally in charge of the club, but would a different system work better? Would Antony strive in a different system for Man United?
Probably style of play more. The problem for Antony is that he can only really play on the right wing. And Manchester United had problems there for a long time. Obviously, Jadon Sancho, like we mentioned before, was played there, didn't really suit him. He's probably prefers to play on the left-hand side. Then you've got the problem that's Marcus Rashford's favourite position. You've also got the problem where that's Garnacho's favourite position. So the right-hand side is the one that tends to be up for grabs, and different players have played there. So Antony can only really play in that position. The problem maybe is the style of play, and is he suited to Premier League football? What Kevin pointed out as well is that Antony's numbers weren't great in Holland. It's been known that players have put up brilliant numbers in Holland. I think Memphis Depay, Cody Gakpo, before that Luis Suarez, Lozano. It's been loads of players that put up really good numbers. Bergwijn, obviously, as well, who went back to Holland. So loads of players that put up good numbers in Holland, and maybe not been able to replicate those levels in the Premier League. But Antony's numbers weren't even that good. I don't think he ever scored more than 10 goals a season in Holland as well. So there's also a player in there. He's a Brazil international. When Manchester United worked with him, a lot of other European clubs were tracking him and thought, this is a really good player. So he's just fallen off track. Now it's going to be a case of whether he can get back on it. Will he get the game time? Because he's just not played enough recently to show that he can bring it back.
I guess then the ultimate question comes, is there a future for Antony at Man United, or do you think this is one where you have to maybe ship him off and see how he does elsewhere?
It's going to be problematic though, because Manchester United are going to have to face making a massive loss if they sell Antony, because nobody's going to pay anywhere near 95 million euros for him. I think they'd be lucky to get 30 million euros, 35, 40 million euros for him. Obviously, the Saudi market would be appealing to sell to probably for Manchester United. The other problem as well is he will want astronomical wages. How many clubs in the world will want to pay what Antony's on? So there's probably going to be a case that if he does leave Manchester United in the summer, that United will either have to subsidise some of his wages, and if it goes out in lower, or even a permanent deal. I'm not sure what clubs and what markets would look at Antony at the moment. Erik ten Hag's future is very much up for debate as well, so it's a case of seeing how it goes until the end of the season. So could a new manager come in, a new sporting director, I say a new sporting director, an actual sporting director for the first time in a long time, and they might look at it and think, well, we can maybe use Antony a different way, a different system. Can we get the best out of him? Do we give him another year? So it's going to all come down to the firstly what the player wants to do, and what the new kind of recruitment system and structure at Manchester United want to do, and the manager, whether that be Erik ten Hag or not. Ten Hag came out in his press conference today, Manu, and he said Antony's unstoppable when he's at his best, but Manchester United fans have not seen that.
Yeah, we not have seen him at his best. That's an interesting quote by Ten Hag saying, well, he's unstoppable when he's at his best. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet at Man United. Of course, this is a really, really fascinating story, Euan, and I think this is one, first of all, people should read your article, which is now out on Transfermarkt. You can also track all the stats that you mentioned on Transfermarkt as well, whether that's the .co.uk, .com or .us, wherever you join us from. right? There is content for you there available, and all the other Premier League stats, market values, etc. They're all on Transfermarkt, so go check that out. We'll be back soon with more content. Until then, cheers and bye-bye.